What's good, everybody? My name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about sampling, resampling, and how to survive week 3 of our 30-day beat challenge. If you're not aware, then we pretty much started that 2 weeks ago. The first week was about creating melodies and chords. The second week was about doing traditional sampling. And now the evolution of sampling is resampling. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this, and the reason why I think that this is incredibly progressive and helpful to like evolving the workflow of how a traditional music producer, I guess, or a modern music producer would build a skill set outside of sound design and XYZ. I think that this approach is a great segue into figuring out how to find your own sound without being an expert on sound design, but also how to just come up with ideas that you never could have like intentionally came up with, but still find something in between in the middle. So way back in the day in the 80s, people started doing what's called sampling on tape machines and stuff, where they would listen to old records and take drums or take, really cool phrases, XYZ, and basically take pieces of that and reformat them into these beats that kind of spurred hip hop and electronic music. In today's day and age, we have a lot of access to tools in which we can actually do that with our own content now. And that's where resampling comes in. And that's why I say that resampling is the evolution of sampling, because now we're no longer bound by, only taking like 100%, stuff that's already been printed and copyrighted and having to deal with all of that. We can use a lot of different tools and technology to build a sequence and then record the best bits of that variation. So on that note, I wanted to talk a little bit about the differences between what we're going to be covering today and what would be the difference between specifically a Hocket machine or just making a mud pie in general. So a Hocket machine is basically creating something that would just randomly create sounds as a whole. And so if I were to find something that would just be a generator, this would be an excellent example of something that would just not be anything in particular, but still make really cool sounds. So now this is really cool, but it doesn't really do anything that's particularly musical, right? And while that's really amazing and you can get some really cool effects, the context of it doesn't really give us any indication in which to build phrases around, because there's not really any pitch or rhythm or repetition to hold on to. Now, if somebody's really creative, definitely they could probably do something like that. But the thing is that it's kind of just random completely. There's not really any rhyme or reason to it. And the same thing goes within even doing something like a mud pie. For example, if I were to pull up maybe like a ARCANUM 6 bass or something, and this is going to explain a lot about why I've kind of gone in the direction that I am now with the last patch that I'll show you. But if I were to go into the neuro basses that I've made, you'll see that we have kind of a combination. So if I were to just hit F and then turn the filter on, like, that's really cool, and we're getting lots of different sounds, and every time I hit this we can create our mud pies with this or whatever. But even still with this, if you're just pushing F and hoping to win, it doesn't really give you any kind of like compositional advantage other than having cool phrases that are within F. And so using these kinds of patches are best meant for either, again, effects or different kinds of fills. Like even if I were to turn on this generator, like we're still getting really cool sounds, but this is stuff that's more building ear candy. This is more stuff that's building these accents and all that. And I totally 100% still find incredible value within this, but the approach behind them I find is very difficult if you get into resampling or recording this basic kind of stuff. So I say basic, it's not basic, but you get what I mean. So what I want to do is actually backtrack a little bit into a couple of things. This other suggestion that I have for you is something that was probably the biggest piece of advice that I got from a recent lesson that I did with somebody, which you probably know who you are if that person is watching this video, to which thank you very much. But basically what they reminded me of was something that is going to take this to the next level, which is what people that were on modular gear, modular hardware, would do in the past. take a sequence, take a melody, take something that is musical, right? This is why I have the Oxy One sequencer. No, you don't need to go and get this. You can watch my ultimate guide to hacking melodies and stuff like that if you need to get to this jump off point. But having a sequence to work with and then applying all of this stuff will make so much more sense. So for example, I have this new set of patches or whatever that I'm working on that goes beyond just basses, that goes beyond just randomization, and instead tries to keep everything relative to whatever it is that I'm playing. So let me show you. So all this stuff is cool, and what I'm basically doing is setting this up to record these different phrases or this different melody that I have, and I was just manipulating the sequencer to change the timing, the pattern, and the octave. But once I have something like that, we can use an amazing tool like Rolling Sampler. This isn't the only way that you can get sound out of this, but just using as a means of recording whatever it is that we make. And from this point, we can start to open this back up and start to find different phrases that might go together in which to build a hook from. And once we have a hook, then it's back to the drawing board with the sampling aspect, to where we use that, we find a hook, we put a beat over it, and suddenly we are back in that game of making hip hop or electronic music or whatever genre fits your style with the drum aesthetic and tempo, if you will. So from this, I know that I didn't really talk much about how to actually make stuff like this. And rather than go into specifics, I want to give a really general piece of advice, which is abusing modulators and abusing your effects, LFOs, not really being inhibited by anything particular. So how do I say this? Basically, as long as you have the sequence, as long as you have something that is relatively tangible, it doesn't matter what you do to it, because it's always going to be somewhat familiar. So while I wouldn't explain how to go into the neural filtering and the pad making or whatever, if you have a list of, free effects, whether it be through your DAW or through Melda or through all of your plugins or whatever, throw some LFOs on it. Throw, randomization, try automation based off of whatever it is that you're making, and continuously loop that same sequence, whether it be a bass line or a melody or a chord progression, or change it into an arpeggiator, whatever, and try to get as much from that sequence as you possibly can. Because all these other things that we're using here will only serve as layers and harmonization to what it is that we're making, if that makes sense. And what's so significant behind this is that you're basically doing what we would be doing with composition anyways, right? So if you were making a melody and then a counter melody, you would be finding two different melodies that go together. Well, you can still do that with all these parameters by just changing the octave or adding a fifth to it, by pitching the whole thing up 7 semitones. You might dance around that, but you get the point. But you can also cut a piece of this out that might be one particular timbre and throw that into a sampler and use that as a brand new instrument. The point is that it continues to give you all of these inspiring tools that were not intentional, but intentional towards the composition. So you're sound designing to a particular composition that you're committing to, and then building all of the instrumentation and all the structure around that. I know that sounds really complicated, but long story short, make a melody, throw some effects all over the melody, doesn't matter what kind of sound you're getting, break the sound, try to maintain that specific familiarity, whether it be with pitch or rhythm, or if it's drums, some kind of pattern. And then once you have that, you can much more easily combine all of those elements into something that will sound like it fits together, as opposed to, oh, I need to make a drum loop. Oh, I need to make a bass line. Oh, now I need to find some keys. Now I need to find some chords. Now I need to find this. And you start doing your preset surfing. This is the evolution of sampling. And this is also, in my opinion, one of the biggest hacks that you can use that will help teach you more about sound design than watching a billion tutorials on how to sound like Skrillex. Don't get me wrong, those have a specific purpose in XYZ, but patches like this that I make, as you can see, have just about everything that I need within a song, right? We've got the bass filtering, we've got the pads, we have the keys, we have the pitch bending, we also have a percussion maker, to which, if you see my live streams, I make drums out of this stuff. You know, it doesn't start this way, but basically through all of these different sounds, we'll kind of play with the pitching and stuff until we get some kicks, until we get something that sounds like a snare, and I'll amalgamate that into my entire drum kit. Resampling is the way to go. Now, if you want a head start, then I suggest you check out alchemy.com, because I've got a bunch of patches like this. I do believe that also within the grid, people like Polarity have, you know, specific Hocket machines and different generators and stuff. But honestly, like, take a random and throw that on some effects, as many as your CPU can handle, and see what comes out. And hopefully you will find some stuff that you at least haven't heard before. Just make sure that you put a limiter at the end of everything. So with that being said, hopefully this was a helpful way to get you inspired to start creating and making your own sound design worlds, because I don't think that this is a mud pie. I don't think that this is just a Hocket machine. This is something that you're actually intentionally building an entire piece of randoms that all seem tangible together. And that is why I think that this is one of the most optimal approaches in how to get really cool stuff and make it actually work for you. So with that out of the way, thank you all so much. I appreciate you watching. Check out alchemy.com and let me know if you all have any questions. Leave a comment for your favorite kind of resampling techniques. If you don't know how to resample, in particular without the rolling sampler, there's a lot of videos on that. I didn't really want to waste your time covering that because it's so simple, but yeah, bye.